Yeah, I'm going to, but you can still open up if you want to a little bit. But I mean, however you want to do it, so I'll be talking about that portion of it too.
Did you want to begin it?
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for coming to our panel, Dreams Realized, Legacies of Black Inventors. My name is Angelia McGowan. I am the managing editor of the Denver Urban Spectrum newspaper, and I just wanted to say we are really excited to see you all, each and every one of you. I would like to introduce our publisher of the Denver Urban Spectrum, the 28-year-old Denver Urban Spectrum, Ms. Rosalyn B. Harris.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to say my sentiments also and say I am very happy to see you here today. We've had a full day. For those of you who were here earlier, we had a panel of experts this morning talking about inventions, and then we also gave essay awards out to some of the essay winners, and one of the parents is here. Her daughter won a Benjamin Banneker clock by one of the panelists today. I am excited that you're here, and I think that today is going to be very inspirational. We learned some things that we didn't know. But before we start, I would like to recognize and thank our sponsors, which include our host, Cherry. Our partnering and supporting sponsors include Wells Fargo, Janus, Denver Water, Ballard Family Mortuary, Excel Energy, Walmart, Rod Smith International, Gilmore Construction, and McDonald's. I'd also like to say if you didn't pick up the latest copy of the Urban Spectrum, we have copies here, and you can read the story about Rod Smith, former Denver Banker. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tanya Ishikawa, and I've done different things with the Denver Urban Spectrum, from write to edit and just help out. And then Bea and Angelia and I decided last year, well, it's been about a year and a half, I believe, to start a company because we're always hearing about events that we could get involved in and help people with, or small businesses that need a little bit of extra public relations, social media help, any of those type of things. And so we've been doing this event now. This is our second year. Cherry Creek came to us last year and said, we need somebody who'd be a presenter for this display that we created a few years back, and we would love it if the Denver Urban Spectrum would take that on. And so we did, and we had wonderful, we decided to add events. They hadn't really had, besides a kickoff event, educational or to go with it. So last year we decided to feature some civil rights leaders. We had Carlotta Walls-Lanier, and we had Marie Greenwood, who was 101 years old when she came to here at the shopping center last year, and this year she's a year older, so she's a wonderful educator in the community. This year I came up with the idea of inventing and inventors to be our theme. There were just so many things telling me that that was the great theme for us to do this year. One of our good friends is Derrick Holmes of Banneker Watches and Clocks, and he's always been telling us about Benjamin Banneker. It's over and over in my head about, what a wonderful inventor and man he was early in our country's history. And then the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office opened last year as well here, and it was a sign of innovation and creative minds in Colorado. We have, when I Googled to see how many inventing organizations there were and people, it's amazing what you have here in this state and in this city. So I decided that would be the theme, and we worked together to pull some incredible people together for you. And I'm very happy that we're doing this. We've had a wonderful day all, And I can't wait till, well, I think I can't wait till next year for such a, for our next theme. So without further ado, I want to introduce our MC. He's been here for the whole day at each event and hanging in there and making us crack up and laugh with his ad-libbing. And he is Orion Carrington. Orion is a local Denver multimedia personality. We met when he was doing shows, well, on Denver Open Media, and he's been doing different events and shows around the community. This is his third year as event host for RAW, Natural Born Artist Denver. He's also host trivia for the Tavern Hospitality Group at the Tavern Denver Tech Center. And he's the MC and host, like I said, for various events around town, different organizations. You can look forward to seeing Orion in 2 upcoming television series. The first one, Food Treasures on Comcast 105 and Street Level on PBS 12. So please welcome Orion.
Thanks so much, Tanya, and of course the Denver Urban Spectrum for having me here to MC this event, this wonderful event, my third of the evening. Dreams Realized, Legacies of Inventors, as part of the Me and the Dream exhibit. Awesome exhibit. If you guys haven't checked it out downstairs, make sure you guys do that after, of course, the panel. We have some awesome panelists here this evening, including UNC Professor Dr. George Junne. Right here. A private guide CEO, Banneker Watches CEO Derrick Holmes, and Alzheimer's Association Colorado Chapter Diversity and Outreach Director Rosalyn Reese. We'll hear from all the panelists here this evening, but we're going to kick things off with Dr. George Junne. Now, until December 2014, just a few months ago, Dr. Junne headed up the Africana Studies Unit in University of Northern Colorado. Dr. Junne is also a fossil hunter for the University of Michigan's Museum of Paleontology and Johns Hopkins University. He has four fossils named after him. He has also worked as a professor at with Professor Robert Brunswick's anthropology site in North Park and a joint archaeology project in the African American community of Deerfield, Colorado. He's a military brat who lived in Germany and France during high school, and during the summers 2000, he taught African American literature and film in Istanbul's Boğaziçi University. Plus, spent 2 years of his sabbatical leave there. His most recent book, A History of the 54th Regiment of Massachusetts Volunteer Colored Infantry of the Civil War, was published in 2012. And he has another book under review by I.B. Tauris's publishers in London, England, about African imperial eunuchs of the Ottoman Empire. That's an interesting read right there. All right, so without further ado, let's welcome up Dr. George Junne, who's going to tell us stories about African American inventors George Horton, Lewis Temple, Norbert Rallieu, and Elizabeth Keckley. Give it up for George Junne.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to see there's such a nice crowd here about inventors. But what I'm going to start off on is someone who was not an inventor, but was responsible for one of the biggest scientific discoveries for the United States. And his name was Onesimus. Onesimus was a slave owned by Cotton Mather and named after a fugitive slave in the New Testament, in the Epistle of Philemon. We can thank Onesimus for one of the most important discoveries in medicine, and that was the inoculation against smallpox. There are 2 writings that you can go to, and one is called Curiosities of the Smallpox, and another is some account of what is said of inoculating or transplanting of smallpox. Now, Cotton Mather wrote that Onesimus told him about the disease and was the one who had received an inoculation. What happened in the part of Africa that Onesimus was in there, where he grew up, his tribe, the Garamanti tribe, practiced an inoculation, primitive form of inoculation against smallpox. So in 1706, Onesimus told Cotton Mather that his people took the juice of the pox. In other words, when you got the smallpox, you got like a blister. You take the juice of that, you cut a hole, just a tiny hole in someone else's skin, and you put a drop of the pox from the person who was affected in the wound. The person would become and would get a very mild case of smallpox, but the patient would not die from it. Now, in essence, vaccinations introduce weak forms of that culture into patients to enable them to develop an immunity, and that's what we do today. So in modern times, laboratories develop different strains of that, and they can control the strength and so forth of the smallpox, and would not lead to any type of an epidemic. Well, Cotton Mather was a member of the Royal Society, and he tried to spread the word about what Onesimus had told him. And that disease decimated New England, decimated Europe and the American Indian communities. And in 1721, in Boston, Mather attempted to promote inoculations. And almost half of the city's population in Boston had had smallpox. Now, there was a Dr. Boylston who decided that he believed Onesimus, and he, along with someone whose name you might recognize, Benjamin Franklin, decided to try this. And Dr. Boylston inoculated his 13-year-old son and 2 slaves, and all 3 survived with a very slight case of smallpox. Boylston then inoculated 247 others. 6 of them did die. When instead of praise, the colonists attempted to hang Boylston for spreading the disease. So what happened is that Benjamin Franklin published the findings in a pamphlet called An Account of Success of Inoculation for the Smallpox in England and America in 1760. Now that, of course, is before the Revolutionary War. By the time of the Revolutionary War, the Continental Army was inoculating each other. Now, also at this particular time, a lot of the people in Boston, including medical doctors, said that this inoculation process was an African superstition. Now, Dr. Boylston continued his experiments with Onesimus' process, and the person who gets the credit for it, if you look this up, is an Englishman, Edward Jenner, who got a lot of money for this. Edward Jenner was not even born when Onesimus started his process. And also, because I work in Turkey, I've also found out that the Turks had the same process, and that probably because the Turks had slavery. They had slaves coming in from Africa, so it was introduced in Turkey, and then later, a little bit later, in the United States, and so the process has been refined, of course, but we can thank Onesimus for this getting rid of smallpox. Another person is George. George Peake was born 1722, died in 1827, and he introduced a type of mortar and pestle. So those in the kitchen know the mortar and pestle for grinding things. He invented something called a stump mortar and spring pestle. And this was used by hanging from a tree so that you could grind large types of objects for it. And he came up with that. Now another person, because all I'm doing is just going through a bunch of different people here, James Fortin. James Fortin was born in 1766. He died in 1802. And he was one of the people that believed that African Americans would do better in Africa, and actually took some African Americans to Africa to settle them in Liberia. But he was born free, he served in the Revolutionary War, on a privateer. It's a ship that was not owned by the military. He worked his way into owning his own sail-making business. And he became the foreman of this factory, and he was the owner of this factory for making sails in 1798. He invented, but did not patent, a device for handling the sails. Before, it was very difficult to put the sails up and down on the ships, and he invented a process for doing that very quickly. So in he also signed a petition to Congress to change the Fugitive Slave Act that was in place, and of course it did not do that. But he also took, as I said, the African Americans to Africa. He was an abolitionist, and even after he died, James Forten's house continued to be a meeting place for abolitionists and others concerned with African American affairs. And it is suspected, not proven, but suspected he could have been the first millionaire. It's not known, and people will argue that back and forth, so that's why I say suspected. Lewis Temple, born in 1800, died in 1854. He was a blacksmith in New Bedford, and he set up a shop in the whaling community. Now, his invention is not something that we would go around and shout about today because it involved revolutionizing the whale hunting industry, and this was called a toggle harpoon. Now, the regular harpoons had a wide base on it, so when you got it into the whale, it would easily pull out. What he did, he added something that was unique. He had a toggle on it so that it was on a pin, so that when it went into the whale and you tried it would catch. That way, it revolutionized the whale business. Anybody who's dealt with mollies, is doing construction work in kitchens, you know about how the mollies work. So he was the one who invented that toggle harpoon that replaced the rigid harpoon. If Temple had patented his invention, he would have undoubtedly become wealthy because it's also used in other weapons that are more complex. In 1853, he was walking home at night. He tripped over a board that a construction crew left in the street. The fall caused him internal injuries, and it rendered him unfit for work. He sued the city for this, and the city gave him nothing, and so his family did not receive any money they had. Norbert Willieu, 1806 to 1894, he was a person who is credited with revolutionizing the sugar industry. So anytime you have to go to the dentist because eating too much sweets, thank a black man. His mother was a slave, his father was a white engineer, and his father also was an inventor. His father was one of these people that acknowledged the paternity of his son and sent him to Paris to L'École Centrale, an institution that's still there. I visited one time. At age 24, he was an instructor there of applied mechanics, and he developed what's called a vacuum pan process for making sugar that is still used. The French didn't seem to want to patent his invention, so he returned home to the United States and he received a patent for this process in 1843. Now, with this process, before this process, sugar was a luxury item. And for most people in the world, you would either use honey or sugar cane. Now, America would be the world's leader in sugar production, and everybody could now afford sugar on their table. He was also quite wealthy from his process, and he went to Egypt and he studied Egyptology. So many of you have heard about the Rosetta Stone that translates Egyptian hieroglyphics, and so we can read them today. He was on the team of the champions that found the answer to that. Elizabeth Keckley, a woman, we don't really talk that much about women inventors, but she was one who invented a process for making patterns because she would make clothes for people. And what she did is that she was born a slave, She refused to have a husband because she found out that her husband was not a free man but was a slave, and she did not want to bring a slavery. So she stayed with him for 8 years. Finally, she emancipated herself and raised the $1,300 through sewing. She went to D.C. and began to make clothes for the wives of the members of Congress. She and Mrs. Lincoln were best friends. So she stayed there, and after the death of Abraham Lincoln, the two remained very close for a period of time. But she invented this pattern, a way of making patterns, so that she could do these clothes. Another woman was Sarah E. Good. She invented a folding cabinet, it's called, in 1885. The folding cabinet is one of the original concepts of a hideaway bed. John Parker, carried out slave. He worked as an iron foundry in Alabama, and because his processes on the line were so good, the workers there did not like him at all. But he was able to buy his freedom. He moved to Ohio, opened up a foundry, and invented what's called a tobacco screw press. It looks like two pieces of board with this handle on it that you go down on the leaves to press them together for processing. His business was there till the close of World War I. Ned is somebody, unfortunately, we only know his name. He was a slave. He was from Pike County, Mississippi, and he created what's called a cotton scraper. According to Ned's owner, a prominent planter, Ned's invention, used by one person and 2 horses, would replace 4 people, 4 horses, and 2 scrapers and 2 plows. Essentially what this did, this contraption, there was a couple plows in the front that opened the dirt up. In back of that was a container for the cottonseed that dropped in, and in back of that were implements that closed up the hole. So you could just do the planting, the plowing, and everything in one particular step. Well, Ned's owner had to sign an affidavit stating that Ned was the inventor of the cotton scraper and he was a slave, because at that time you could not patent the invention of a slave without the patent department wouldn't let it. You had to say it was that a slave did it. Now, what happened from all this, Ned disappears from history. Stewart and his family got rich selling Ned's double cotton scraper, and this was the advertisement for slavery that they used. It said, "I am glad to know that your implement is the invention of a Negro slave, thus giving the lie to the abolitionist cry that slavery dwarfs the mind of the Negro. When did a free Negro ever invent anything?" So not only do we have the slave being cheated out of everything, but we also have his invention being used against people. I wanted to talk a little bit about Lewis Latimer, 1848 to 1928. He was the one that got the procedure for mass producing carbon filaments for electric lights. His father was a runaway slave, and his story stirred Frederick Douglass to write his first public anti-slavery piece. He enlisted in the Navy. At the war's end, he became an office boy in a patent office, and Alexander Graham Bell approached him for blueprints in 1876 for his telephone, and so he drew those. In 1880, he patented an invention for improving a light bulb filament, and he also designed the standard light bulb base. He was working on electric lighting in Connecticut, and he also supervised the installation of the electricity in New York City and Philadelphia and Canada. And he began working with the Edison Company. Now, I'm going to end with one other person, and I know that many of you have been walking down the street or by a beach or something like that, minding your business, strutting along in your Sunday finest, and all of a sudden you got hit with a stream of water. somebody has a super soaker. Thank a black man. The super soaker was invented by a man named Johnson. He got his patent, he invented this in 19, and it was originally named Power Drencher. He was a nuclear engineer for NASA, and he was a scientist from Los Angeles, California. He took his invention to what then was the Laramie Company, and that was later bought out by Hasbro. So he walked into the office with this mechanism for shooting water. They weren't too interested until he shot the water across the room. They said, "We want this." The company did not seem to show interest before that. Now, he did receive a patent in 1991, and Hasbro renamed it the Super Soaker. Johnson has over 80 patents, including ones for a heat pump, a distance digital measuring device, a wet diaper detector, a hair drying curler, a toy airplane, and rocket launchers. He's a founder of the Johnson Research and Development Company. He had to take Hasbro to court because he claimed that they were not paying him his rightful royalties. In arbitration, Johnson was awarded $72.9 million. So the next time you're escorted by a neighborhood boy or by someone at the beach or swimming pool, thank a black man.
That was some interesting stuff. Thank you so much, Dr. Junne. And we will have opportunity to ask all the panelists different questions at the end of the evening, but we're going to get to all of them first, let them say a couple of things, and then we'll go into question and answer after that. So, moving right along, our next panelist is Sid Wilson. Has owned and operated a private guide, incorporated a group of tour and event transportation service companies specializing in research and marketing of cultural and heritage tour itineraries, focusing on African American family reunions, meetings, youth programs, and conventions. Sid set forth to provide tours highlighting the contributions of Colorado's pioneering African Americans in exploration, the fur trade, mining, ranching, and the military, as well as provide outdoor recreation options. He leverages his relationship with organizations like Black American Visit Colorado, the Colorado Historical Society, Colorado State Parks, National Parks Services, and the International Guild Academy, or Guide Academy, to assist in the development of the materials of the tour guides that he trains his employees. In 2013, Sid Wilson and the private guide actually were inducted into the Denver and Colorado Travel Hall of Fame. So that's pretty awesome. Which recognizes outstanding individuals who have made significant contributions to the travel industry in city and state. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Sid Wilson.
Thank you. To find myself on the streaming video, this is definitely new territory. George is really extremely modest. He, in addition to a bunch of other things that the way he was introduced, he's also a big-time jazz aficionado. But really, his latest venture, he's a brewmeister, and he makes a really dynamite brew. So I just wanted to share that with you. Getting the call from B to participate in this forum this afternoon is really quite special because my particular subject is Madam C.J. Walker. Most remarkable person, the inventor of a spectacular hair product that ultimately she became a millionaire, probably the first self-made female millionaire for certain. other females who had accumulated fortunes like this probably came to them by way of inheritance. She actually earned it selling her unique products. But more interesting for me, she's an entrepreneur. People classify me as an entrepreneur. And the entrepreneurship is self-empowerment. And when we begin talking about people such as Madam C.J. Walker, and others, people of color, who came out of the institution of enslavement, we have to begin to understand the unique aspects and attributes that allowed them to empower themselves from this incredibly harsh institution. She was born from enslaved parents. She was Madam C.J. Walker. She was born in a little Louisiana community called Delta, Louisiana, in the year 1867. So this is immediately after the Civil War. Now you have to understand, when we do this kind of research, find out about these remarkable people, one of the things that's so unique about Madam C.J. Walker is at least that her accomplishments were documented in an era when, at the start of really mass media, as we kind of begin to know it today. So she left a really remarkable trail after the 1900s. She was born in 1867. She died in 1919, and we'll get to that. But she left a remarkable trail for us to follow. And it's a trail of continued empowerment. Born in 1867 in the South, one of the things that, just because the Emancipation Proclamation and the Civil War had been fought, supposedly freeing folks, but methods were employed to keep African Americans tied to the land. All kinds of vagrancy laws. You had to have proof that you were gainfully doing something. Otherwise, former plantation owners, they could press you back into service. There were so many tools and implementations of laws that forced you back to the land. And Madam C.J. Walker's parents were like that. They were sharecroppers. So they planted, they had to borrow from the people who, quote, employed them. They had to borrow. And they never had enough money to really get out of that particular situation. But on top of that, Madam C.J. Walker, her real name is Sarah Reedlove, and her parents, both of them, died in 1874 in Louisiana as a result of a yellow fever outbreak. So with her older sister and her older brother, they were orphaned in Delta, Louisiana, and it was to empower yourself out of this particular situation, that particular journey, is who Madam C.J. Walker is really all about. Now, if it, in my dream scenario world, and if we were to have a museum, if we had a museum, I think one of the most prominent items in that museum would be the washer tub that was the key to empowerment for so many African Americans. Washing your way to freedom. This was incredible. Taking in laundry, making maybe $1.50, $2 a week, and this is what you did to sustain your family. When, with the death of her mother and father, they were they left Delta and crossed the river right over to Vicksburg, Mississippi. And she became a washer. Her sister and her became washerwomen, taking in the clothing of people, trying to get paid on a regular basis, subjected to all kinds of abuses by those people who sometimes didn't pay them, took advantage. You know, when we talk about empowerment and what you had to overcome, you know, have your parents been bought and sold? Have you had to deal with the possibility that any day a member of your family could be lynched on the spot? For the women who could be casually raped by any drunken white man who considered a black female as part of his own birthright. This is the environment in which she grew up and had to overcome to become the person that she ultimately became. As the years went by, was married when she was 14 years old. Married a special man, Moses McWilliams, and they had a daughter, Lalia. And her story is incredible, just almost as incredible as her mom. In 1885, when she was born, a couple of years later, her father, according to the story, he was lynched and killed. So a young Sarah Breedlove moved from Vicksburg. For the next so many years, she was a washerwoman. Now, one of the things, there was an issue, and when you read about her story, the issue with black hair, and I thought it was fascinating, and I put books out on it now, but the treatment of your hair, the issue with dandruff, the hair falling out, this was a constant source of irritation for black women. And there were solutions, there were salves, one way to making a living. People had various types of salves, all kinds of petroleum products, homemade products, and various degrees of success, but no ultimate success in addressing the issue. Now, if we fast forward a little bit, when Madam C.J. Walker became famous, she was often asked what was the secret of her formula for the hair, and she never divulged it, even to the day she died. But one of the ingredients, it had to do with sulfur. There was a sulfur component in it, and that would, the medical profession at the time would acknowledge the fact that there were medicinal properties that would ease the scarring that people had from scratching their head. One of the stories that Sarah Breedlove would tell was about the time she went to deliver her laundry to a white lady, and when she opened her laundry package, there were blood stains on it, and it was to the horror of Sarah because she took so much pride in her work. One of the things she was always known for is an incredibly hard worker. One of the ways to enter the market in St. Louis as another laundry person, because the competition was fierce. So many people were doing laundry. Those were some of the few paths open to you to make a living. And what she did was guarantee next day delivery, which is an incredible guarantee to offer someone. But that's how she was able to enter the market, by guaranteeing next day delivery, and the first wash was free. So she was able to attract customers that way. So what had happened, the blood had appeared because she'd been scratching her head, and the blood from she hadn't dripped down on her laundry, and the white woman slapped her and in front of her daughter, and it was just a really kind of defining moment for her in her attitude to push forward. Ultimately, she met a man from Denver who happened to be working for a local Denver newspaper. I think it was the Statesman. And he was in St. Louis at the time looking for advertisers. One of the things that's kind of interesting when you do the research of the era before integration, those who were striving, there was a strong community of empowerment. People had no other choice. You had to do for self, or you just couldn't do anything. There was no in between. People who through the churches, you had your ministers, you had people who were teachers, you had blacks who were doctors. And St. Louis, because of its size, you had a large black community that was self-sustaining. And so this Charles Walker in St. Louis looking for expanding opportunities in the advertising field for newspapers. And that's how he happened to meet Madam C.J. Walker, who by this time had developed her first formulas because to mitigate this hair issue. And there was competition. And Mr. Walker explained to Madam C.J. Walker, or Sarah Breedlove at the time, that if she really wanted to make an impact, and she would have to leave St. Louis because the competition, proactive relationship during the time that they were married. Now, ultimately, she had to, after she stayed here for a couple of years in Denver, and she was able to go out and recruit other ladies to sell her hair products. And as that network began to grow, and the necessity to provide more product, because the worst thing that can happen if you're employed is the demand exceeds your capacity to deliver. So ultimately, she moved to Pittsburgh, where she opened up a college, a beauty college, and people would come and she would teach them the rudiments of hair care based on the sale of her products. In addition to her products that would go into the hair, she developed her own hot comb, which was developed in such a way that as it pulled through the hair, the early hot comb France, and that was a whole nother side story, but she did it that the comb would kind of curl upward so it wouldn't burn the scalp all the time. So it's almost like a patented hot comb. So between the products themselves and the hot comb, she was able to create this college in Pittsburgh, and ultimately the people of the progressive black community in Indianapolis, Indiana, were drawn to what she was able to do and convinced her to move her operation to Indianapolis, Indiana, where she opened up a tremendous factory. And she hired a black attorney, Mr. Ransom, who had been previously a Pullman porter, to run her company. He was a trained lawyer. And offices to do some uplift for black people, but when he got into the office as a Southerner, he resorted to his Southern tradition. One of the things that Madam C.J. Walker promoted, along with W.E.B. Du Bois, along with Booker T. Washington, was the fact that they had to do something about the lynch laws. The biggest contribution ever given to the NAACP was a $5,000 donation by Madam C.J. Walker. She promoted all kinds of civil rights causes. She was a champion. They thought that she was a radical. She would work with A. Philip Randolph in the early days of the Pullman Porter, trying to develop the Pullman Porters unions. She was an activist to the first order, never forgetting where she came from. She was just a remarkable human being, and there are a couple of books out, and they're in print, and I would suggest for empowerment, you have to read about these people. The TV movies are wonderful, but they don't strike you the same way. They do not empower you to go out and do the work that people like Madam C.J. Walker and the people that Dr. Junne and Derrick and Roz will be talking about, to empower you to go out and do this kind of work. Right here, we've got B. Harris. She's like Madam C.J. Walker. She empowers people like ourselves to get up here and to continue to tell these stories. So, thank you.
Sid Besson, thanks so much. Now we are going a little bit over on time here, panelists, so let's try to stick closer to the time periods. It's very interesting stuff. I know you guys are soaking it up, so if we run a little bit over, you guys will stick around, right? Good, because I know you guys want to actually ask questions of the panelists as well. Speaking of time, we have Derrick Holmes, CEO of Banneker Watches and Clocks. Now, Derrick founded Holly Rock Advertising Company in 1994, specializing in producing jingles, logos, slogans, and voiceovers and commercials and ads for TV and radio. Holly Rock's clients included TWA Airlines, Coors, BET, and the NFL. He entered into the watch business full-time when he founded Marquee in 1998, a concept that was built around athletes' signatures and their likenesses in the dials of the watches and clocks. He got people like Kurt Warner, who was the quarterback of the St. Louis Rams at the time and Super Bowl champ. Pretty impressive. He also had people like Tim Hardaway, John Elway, Terrell Davis, Emmitt Smith, to name a few. Now, he founded Banneker Watches and Clocks in 2003 and was able to negotiate several agreements with and strategic alliances with all kinds of wonderful jewelers and cool watch companies out there. So he's been developing several strong relationships with celebrities and influencers who are now a part of the Banneker story and early adopters of the brand. Ladies and gentlemen, here to talk about Benjamin Banneker himself, Derrick Holmes.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I would like to thank B and Tanya and Bat, the organization itself, for considering me to be able to come up and talk to the great panel people here as well. It's so incredible because everywhere you look, African American contributions to civilization has been incredible. And when you look at Benjamin Banneker, who was the first African American scientist and inventor, and someone who was self-taught, had the presence of mind. At 21, he received a pocket watch from a Quaker named Joseph Levi. And he was so excited about this watch, unlike most of us, including myself, he took it apart. And if any of you have ever seen the inside of inner working of a watch, if you do, you're going to put it back together, almost immediately. But he didn't. He took this watch and he took the inner working pieces. And because he was outside of Baltimore, Maryland, which is now Ellicott City, Maryland, the great accomplishment of him making this clock out of wood wasn't because he was being cute. It was because there was no scrap metal and there was no other things or materials that he could use in order to actually make this watch. So, you know, he said, I'm going to do it out of wood. So he cut all the pieces and inner working, and within 2 years, by the time he was 23, he had ended up making the first fully assembled clock built in America that kept time for over 50 years. Now I'm going to jump ahead of my story a little bit to let you know when we say that, the 50 years really isn't fair, because he was born in 1731 and 1806. So the day that Benjamin Banneker was having his funeral and they were out at the burial grounds, some people broke in his home. And I'm sure they took a lot of important things out of there. And in my mind, I like to think they probably took that clock and they burned his house to the ground. So that clock could be in someone's great granddaughter's attic, you know, still working, you know, as we speak. He was also the first civil rights activist. He responded to then Secretary of the State, Thomas Jefferson, who had an article basically saying that African Americans were just naturally inferior and didn't have the same learning capabilities as white folk. And Banneker responded in a letter, and so dynamic, and he also sent his almanac, which he produced for 5 years. And he dropped that in, and he ended it, your most humble servant, Benjamin Banneker. And he heard back from Thomas Jefferson, who, you know, he ate a little bit of crow, and he said, I'm absolutely wrong. And they became lifelong friends. And not only that, Thomas Jefferson also took his almanac over to Paris and some of the other places as well. I was inspired so much by Benjamin Banneker that I founded my first watch company, Marquee Watch. I was on the highway, and I had this vision about putting athlete signatures and likeness inside the dial of a watch. And it was so strong that I couldn't find myself being up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning designing. Now before that, and this is 1998, special relationship with watches. I wasn't a collector. You know, I liked a nice watch here and there. And I put this company together, Marquee Watch, named after the marquee player. Terrell Davis is my. I always say that I use him as like a guinea in order to put it together. And his watch was the first watch I ever made. But I ended up closing the deal with Kurt Warner right after he won the Super Bowl. The confetti was flying in the air, and I was at the Super Bowl party, and I told my friends, I said, that's going to be the first person I sign. Of course, they said, no more beer for Derrick. But fortunately, I pursued it, and I was able to do that. But I was at a friend's house, and I was looking at African-American contributions to civilization. And I knew about Benjamin Banneker, and I knew that he had surveyed Washington, D.C., but the first sentence said, Benjamin Banneker made the first clock in America entirely out of wood. And here I am, a black CEO of my own company, and I didn't know that. So it was like Moses seeing the burning bush. You know, it totally, you know, flipped me all the way around, and I came, you know, almost learning as much as I could about Benjamin Banneker. I went out to Ellicott, Maryland. I read a myriad books and things on him, and I was able, after paying a lot of money, to own the rights to do watches, clocks, and jewelry in his name. Ironically, the year before that, I had thought about inlaying wood inside the dial of a watch, but I never did anything with it. So when that happened, it was like Miss Pac-Man. They meet Banneker with the wood grain and naming it after him. So we created watches and we created wood. This is our 10-year anniversary, so we were able to put a lot of things together. Thank you. Before I forget, I want acknowledge my junior CEO, my daughter, 7-year-old Nevaeh back there. I got to keep an eye on her because it may be a hostile takeover in the future. But I know we're running short on time, and I want to keep everything flowing. But I also, with piggybacking off Sid, is an incredible historian. He taught me about Mamie Pleasant, someone that may be part 2 next year, who was a multi-millionaire, self-made lady that was in San Francisco that a lot of people don't know about, and I'm sure Dr. Junne knows as well. But we used to go to the Martin Luther King Center, and we would be in the sauna, and we'd be holding court. It was like a Mel Oprah moment, all the guys would be in there. But also, I was able to be very close to Madam C.J. Walker, not in truth, but in spirit, where my mother graduated from Madam C.J. Walker School of Beauty in Chicago in the 40s. So I grew up with Madam C.J. Walker hair products in my home. And I was so inspired by her, my actual favorite entrepreneur. And in 1999, I wrote a play, funded it and directed it, and we put it on at Mount Bello with the school children there. And it was a great success. We did it for Black History Month. So I'm also an historian on her, and she is just, incredible. And that span of time, from the age of being 37 and dying at the age of 51, she amassed this fortune and became the mother of multi-level marketing, had over 20,000 agents working for her. So it's a story that must be told a lot more for all people of all colors, because she's an American. And the same thing with Banneker. It wouldn't matter if he was pink, but to be able to take a pocket watch and to be able to do what he did and create it, the first plot, is quite fascinating. So I want to thank you for your time for listening. Sid says something very important, is that there are not enough movies and not enough documentaries made about some of the achievements of African American folks. So, getting some books on some of the people that we're talking about, if you don't know much more about them, it'll be quite fascinating. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely. I mean, as you guys are hearing all the different inventors and creators that are in the American community, not just this month, but throughout the entire year, make sure you guys check them out and learn about African American history and some of the inventors that are a part of it, because it's a very rich history out there. And these guys are just brushing over the surface because we don't have a lot of time for it. So.
Let me just say one thing too. And I just wanted to plug just for a second. The Rocky Mountain Inventors Association sent some representatives here today, and they've been here all day long with us, so I really appreciate the fact that they've hung out with us and learned with us as well. And they have some information up here, and if people are interested in becoming an inventor or have some invention ideas, I think the people from that organization can help you a little bit. They were going to have one of their speakers speak at one of the earlier events, Amadou Sarr, but he was out of the country. So I guess look up his name. I forget what he invented, but yeah. Do you know what he invented, Amadou? No? A language translation, yeah. Okay, so I just wanted to plug that in before I forgot.
No problem. And we have one more panelist here this evening. And again, make sure you guys have some questions lined up for our panelists that are speaking, because they're a definite resource for you guys. But last but not least, we have Rosalyn Reese, Director of Diversity and Outreach at the Alzheimer's Association Colorado chapter. In addition, she serves as a public policy on the Public Policy Committee, and she's earned an undergraduate degree in business management at the University of Phoenix, and a graduate certificate in healthcare policy and regulatory leadership at the University of Denver. A graduate of African American Leadership Institute and the Regional Institute of Health and Environmental Leadership. In 2011, Rosalyn received the Denver Urban Spectrum's African Americans Who Make a Difference Award. So that's awesome. Give her a that. And just last year, she was awarded the Denver section of the National Council of Negro Women Living Portraits of African American Women Community Service Award. So that's awesome as well. Tons of accolades. Can't wait to hear her speak. Rosalyn is a Denver native. She is married with 3 daughters, 3 granddaughters. What? Hey, they don't crack. I like it. They don't crack. And she is the niece of Dr. Raymond P. Phillips, the cordless phone inventor, and that's what she's going to speak about right now. Give it up for Ms. Rosalyn.
I appreciate that. Good afternoon. Thank you, B, and Julia, and Tanya, and all of the sponsors, and all of my family and friends that are here. It's a blessing to be here. And this is definitely not about me as it is about the man who inspired me. We, as we've heard, stand on many great shoulders, and it's just a tribute and honor to be here today to be able to share with all of you